I expected to laugh, but there came a point when I realized I wasn't laughing anymore. Hello, good people. This is Joanna with the Harmonious.Balance channel. And you know, if there is one thing that can throw me off balance or off kilter, it's when life makes me question my faith. So today I want to talk with you about one of my faith struggles, the church, and the state of the Black church specifically. So you see from the title, I saw the movie Honk For Jesus, Save Your Soul. And if you watch my video, Is God a Superhero? You know I'm not that big on movies. But I decided to go to the movies this past Sunday to see this particular film. I believe it was intended to be more satirical, a good blend of salient and funny. There were definitely some moments that had me laughing to a point of tears, but by the end, I was very sad. Not to the point of tears, but I very well could have cried. And it made me think about the current state of the Black church. Now, if you watched the first My Faith Struggles series, How Do You Experience God? You heard me talk about how I stopped going to church years ago and have yet to return. More recently, like in the past couple of months, I considered visiting a couple of churches, but then after listening to a couple more sermons within the last couple of weeks, I changed my mind. Like, nope, not going. And I'm not the only person that feels this way. I got some stats for you. So Gallup did some polls on church membership back in 2020. I'll leave the link in the description box where you can read more about the data if you want to. But here's a quick snapshot. Church membership has fallen from 73% in 1940 and stayed fairly level until the late 90s. But by 2020, it fell to 47%. Now, generationally, there's been a decline across the board, with Gen X and millennials showing the greatest decline. If you were to break it down across gender, race, education, marital status, political affiliation, location, being a Protestant versus Catholic, there is still decline across the board. Now, I expected Black people to have the least change because the narrative is that we're probably more devoted Christians. But this data doesn't bear that out. It's fairly on par with all of the other subgroups, with just about a 20% drop. Now, the reason for these numbers stay pretty high level in Gallup's explanation. So I'm going to take some liberty here and hypothesize why I think the Black church is continuing to lose its appeal. I've come up with 10 reasons, and I'll go from what I think are more lightweight to perhaps more heavier reasons. First up, we got more options. In other words, online church services. Folks can hop around listening to multiple ministers and do not have to commit, but still enjoy a sermon or a church service, all from the comfort of their own home. A church venue is not as popular for weddings anymore. For funerals, though, I think people are slow to ditch the church. But if I were to guess, I'd say that that's on the decline as well. I'm noticing people are utilizing funeral home chapels more and more. Number 2. Church services have been too long. There's less of an appetite to be in church for hours on end and attending multiple services throughout the week. Folks have gotten the revelation that it's not necessary to be in church every time they turn around just to be in right standing with God. People work on the weekends and they work long hours during the week. They don't want to spend most of their free time tied up in church. Number 3, outdated and out of touch approaches. Some churches are just slow to evolve with the times on a number of fronts: technology, attire, music, length of service, etc. They can also be out of touch, as the saying goes, that they're so heavenly minded that they're no earthly good. There's a lot of topics, a lot of elephants in the room that go unaddressed. I remember after the Zimmerman verdict, the man who killed Trayvon Martin, our community was in distress, myself included. And even though at that time I wasn't really going to church, I wanted to hear ministers address it. Now, I didn't scour the internet. There are a bajillion ministries that I know nothing about. But I logged onto a few and realized they weren't talking about it, and that discouraged me. I decided to try one more time, and luckily I landed with Bishop Jakes. I streamed his message where he addressed it. Another time, after the 2016 presidential election, I felt this heaviness that I wanted lifted off of me. But I didn't want to go through the search that I went through before. I was living in Chicago at the time, and I gave it some thought. and I decided to visit Trinity United Church of Christ. This was the church that the Obamas had belonged to, and I figured that they probably would have something more specific to say. And thankfully, I was correct. Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III delivered a word that lifted the heaviness. Now, you might say, Joanna, all's well that ends well. Well, I say I shouldn't have to think that hard about it or be skeptical at all that ministers would be in sync with what's going on. Number 4, overpromising and underdelivering. What's really the value in church membership? Now, there's a lot I can say here, but I'll just leave it with that question. Again, what's the value of church membership? Number 5, we're more educated and thus more discriminating. I say this because there was a time when it came to spiritual matters that our minds were checked at the door. We weren't allowed to question anything. Our worldview was very narrow. And as we've become more educated and broadened our horizons, I think we've become more discriminating, more attentive, critical, and better able to articulate dissent, opposition, and discomfort. Number 6, being spiritual versus religious. A lot of people appreciate the spiritual enlightenment associated with religion, but the dogma and doctrine, I remember a friend saying she knew how to eat the meat but spit out the bones. Like I said in the first My Faith Struggles video, I would argue that there's a lot of bones. And that probably wrecks most of our spiritual appetites. Number 7, political stances. Now, I shared in the politics and religion video that this was one of the things that tipped me over the edge and made me say deuces to church. I'll let you watch that video for my full take on that. For now, I will say what I've said before. The United States of America is not a church or any place of religious order, nor subject to any doctrine thereof. Number 8, the prosperity doctrine. This is probably a prime example of when the church went completely overboard, the modern day church, that is. And this is what was on crazy display in Honk For Jesus. I think the intent behind the prosperity message was to introduce us to the God of abundance, to counter this idea that we had to be of lowly and meager means, when God actually has no problem with us having more. But the who, what, when, where, why, and how it all went left, I really don't know. All I know is the materialism got out of control. What got me, though, was the message underneath it all, that God's blessings for us were solely predicated on the church and how we gave to the church. But the only people that walked away with abundance were the church leaders. Folks got tired of being broke while watching the pastors live high off the hog. Number 9, we're almost done. Legalism, patriarchy, and sexism. Now, whether we want to admit it or not, the church is steeped in patriarchy. It seems like the church really doesn't grasp the concept of grace and remains wedded to legalism. And women are not treated fairly. More and more people are waking up to this idea that they don't have to subject themselves to that kind of energy anymore, and they're walking away. All right, number 10, hypocrisy, vanity, and distrust of leadership. Now, I don't think I need to provide examples of hypocrisy among and distrust for church leadership. If you've been around for a while or followed the church for a while, then you know of local, national, and even international financial corruption and sexual misdeeds. But I'm going to focus on the vanity of church leadership because its current form seems to be a bit new. Now, to be circumspect, I think there's an attempt to rebrand what being a Christian looks like. For so long, being a Christian was seen as boring, restrictive, and behind the times. Now Christians want to be seen as cool and sexy. Ministers want to be trendsetters and influence the culture. They want to be on the A-list and hobnob with celebrities. And while I think the church leadership needs to be comfortable with being the center of attention because they're pulled on all the time, the vanity of it all is actually wanting all eyes to be on them. Now, 2 ministers are coming to mind, and I'm not going to say any names, but one man was recently outed for infidelity, and it really wasn't that much of a surprise. I saw a couple of photos of him clearly happy with his physique. He had on shorts sagging, looking like he didn't even have on any underwear. The other minister is a black female that seems like she's really into fashion. And it's like every time she steps up to preach, she's trying to make a fashion statement. Now, I know I said 2 ministers, but I have a third example where a minister recently took up a Sunday service to essentially sell a product. And surprise, surprise, he has invested money into this product. So you're probably thinking, Joanna, what's so wrong with these things? No one wants to be a fuddy-duddy Christian. Now, in and of themselves, there isn't anything wrong with them. To a point that I'm like, dude, You all into showing off your body? Go become a model. Get into bodybuilding. If you're into fashion, immerse yourself in the fashion world. If you have business acumen, then go hard after your business pursuits. You have choices. So you'll probably say now, well, Joanna, that isn't their calling. Well, that actually proves my point. If it's not their calling, then why is it commingled with ministry? So Joanna, are you saying that ministers can only stay in one lane? Actually, no. I believe we could have multiple interests and talents, but the lane of ministry should be fiercely protected with some serious boundaries and discipline. Ministry actually isn't about the shepherd, it's about the sheep. So what does your sexual appeal have to do with my spiritual well-being? Ministry isn't about being seen. What does what you wear have to do with lost souls? I seem to remember a couple of scriptures about being of no reputation and not letting people make a fuss over you. Because you know, when the lines start to get blurred and it becomes more about you and not the spiritual well-being of those under your pastoral and ministerial care, downfall becomes inevitable and even imminent. But let me close out going back to the movie. I said I felt sad. One of the reasons I felt sad is that the movie wasn't a total caricature. At times they were straight clowning and it was very funny. Other times the clownishness wasn't funny at all, but an accurate depiction. I felt sad because no one should be able to fathom a scenario where the word clownish is an accurate depiction of the church, especially the Black church, the once central force of a people. There shouldn't even be opportunity for a film like this to be made. Not because of reverence and mere respect for the church, but because the people of the church shouldn't provide the fodder for it. Whew. That was a lot, I know. But let me know in the comments what you thought of the movie. As well, you can share your thoughts on the state of the Black church. Well, that is all for now. I will see you later, good people.